Hi, this is Lou here to try to answer a question that affects many people. Why is it so hard to get people to playtest prototypes? Well, usually it's hard, although occasionally not. Some designers live in metropolitan areas where there are lots and lots of people and lots of game groups, and it's easier to find one that's compatible. Some of them have big reputations and people will playtest simply because it's Reiner Knizia's game or Friedemann Friese's game or something like that. And some are simply lucky. Now, I was told some years ago that Reiner Knizia playtests 6 evenings a week with a regular group. I don't know if that was true. I don't know if it is true now, but I wouldn't be surprised. I recently was testing weekly with a regular college group, but they're graduating and I'm moving away. So there are 3 major reasons why it can be difficult to get your games playtested. One you can control, one you can't, one is 50-50. I'll describe them briefly first. The cannot control is there are so many new published games. People would rather play a published game. The one you can control is there are so many designers whose new games suck, and you can make sure yours don't. And the 50-50 is even if your games don't suck, players may have encountered other prototype games that do. First reason, there are too many games. There are so many published games, over 1,000 tabletop games. It's quite common for people to bring a new game to a game session. Not only does the bringer want to play, but if people are going to play a new game, and the cult of the new is rampant nowadays, so they like to play new games, they'll play the good-looking published game. There can be lots of anticipation about new games involved too for those who fool around with Board Game Geek and such. So what chance does an unknown prototype have? It doesn't have the looks, it doesn't have the publicity. And when I say looks, games I've seen recently that looked really good because they had nice miniatures and really good art and so on. Blood Rage, Mechs vs. Monsters, Innis. And that's just in 2 weeks of going to one group. Now let me interject here about video games. I'm mainly talking about tabletop games. Video games are different because someone can play the game without having to read any rules, without having to do anything but just sit down and play. And it's really easy to distribute the games to anybody who wants to play, whether they're 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles away, because they're all electrons, digital. Or as people say, digital is the wrong word, but let's say electronic. You don't have those possibilities in tabletop games. So, back to tabletops. A reason why people don't want to play prototypes is perhaps you're not prepared. Most people want to play a good game. If you haven't tested yours enough solo to get rid of the worst edges, it won't be a good game. Games almost always suck when they start out. Of course, it's possible that your games just plain suck too, and then you just need to get better, but it's hard to get better without getting playtesting. So, why would they want to try any of your other games if your first game sucks? They're there to enjoy themselves, not to suffer through a poor game. Of course, we can observe that many published games are poor as it is, but they look a lot better. Perhaps also the game isn't appropriate. You need to be sure your prototype is the kind of game the group might want to play. So if they like parallel competitions, or they like puzzles disguised as games, which are often the same thing, those two, they're unlikely to want to play a war game, which is highly interactive and directly conflictual. If they like board games and card games, will they want to play your RPG? Some will, some won't. If your game is long, you've got a problem. Games are shorter these days, and partly it's because people don't want to get stuck in a long game they dislike when they're playing new games all the time. Always keep in mind, not everyone likes the kind of game you like or design. In fact, most don't. So try to offer games that are appropriate to the people who are present. Well, then we have the problem of incompetent designers. Their prototypes haven't been played enough solo, and then they suck, of course, or there may be other reasons why they suck. Once a player has suffered through this, they're much less likely to try it again, even with another person, another designer. So even if your games don't suck, if those players have played other prototypes that suck, they'll be reluctant to play yours. That's just natural. This is the 50-50 thing that you can somewhat control. You can try to separate yourself from those amateur so-called designers. Try to establish some credibility. Bring games of yours that have been published, for example, or show in other ways that you're for real, from writing blogs, from participating in conventions, so on. Behave in a professional way. Don't argue with the players. Don't try to make them play the way you want them to. You should never do that anyway, but especially not if you wanted to have your games play tested. I'd say don't play in your own playtests, but there are some people who disagree. There are minor reasons too, and sometimes people just aren't going to playtest no matter what. Finicky, whatever. Thanks for listening.